What if I told you there was once a gun that could shoot around corners, or a revolver that fired actual rockets? Or how about a pistol that was also a sword and brass knuckles all at the same time? Today, we're counting down the 10 most insane firearms ever designed by inventors who clearly thought, you know what this gun needs? More chaos. From triangular bullets to palm-squeezed pistols, these weapons push the boundaries of what's even possible. We're going from bizarre to absolutely mind-blowing. So smash that like button because you're about to see firearms that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about guns. Let's dive into the madness. Number 10. Krummlauf, Germany. In 1944, German engineers literally bent a gun barrel and called it a day. The Krummlauf wasn't just strange, it was desperate genius gone wrong. This curved barrel attachment for the Sturmgewehr 44 was Hitler's personal brainchild, designed to let soldiers shoot around corners without exposing themselves. Think you're safe behind that wall? Think again. The infantry version bent at 30 degrees, while the tank version cranked it up to a spine-tingling 45 degrees. But here's where things get absolutely wild. The bullets didn't survive the journey intact. Instead of firing one bullet, this thing essentially became a shotgun, with bullet fragments spraying everywhere after shattering inside the curved barrel. Talk about unintended consequences. The 30-degree version lasted about 300 rounds before the barrel gave up completely. The 45-degree version? A pathetic 160 rounds. Imagine explaining to your commanding officer that your revolutionary corner shooting weapon just exploded after 5 minutes of use. Despite being mechanically fascinating, the Krummlauf proved that sometimes the simplest solutions really are the best. When your engineering marvel performs worse than just, walking around the corner, maybe it's time to go back to the drawing board. Number 9. Dardick Revolver. What do you get when you cross a revolver with a magazine-fed pistol and throw in some seriously questionable ammunition design? You get David Dardick's fever dream from the 1950s. The problem Dardick was trying to solve actually made sense. Traditional revolvers were limited by their cylinder capacity, and reloading was slow. His solution? Triangular bullets called trowns, fed from a magazine into open-sided chambers. This wasn't just weird for the sake of being weird. The triangular cartridges could pack 50% more efficiently in a magazine than traditional round cartridges. The Model 1500 held 15 rounds, which was impressive for its time. But here's where genius met reality with a spectacular crash. The feeding mechanism was about as reliable as a chocolate teapot. Getting triangular cartridges to smoothly transition from a magazine into a revolving cylinder proved nearly impossible. Jams were constant, failures were frequent, and accuracy was questionable at best. Only about 100 of these revolutionary revolvers were ever produced between 1958 and 1962. Today, surviving examples are worth more than some people's cars, not because they work well, but because they're mechanical curiosities that represent one man's ambitious attempt to reinvent the wheel by making it triangular. Number 8. Duck's Foot Pistol. Imagine you're a ship captain in the 1780s, and your crew decides they've had enough of your leadership. What you need isn't just a gun, you need a crowd control device. Enter the Duck's Foot Pistol, the 18th century's answer to spray and pray. Named for its distinctive splayed barrel arrangement that resembled a duck's webbed foot, this flintlock marvel typically featured 4 barrels that all fired simultaneously with a single trigger pull. The concept was beautifully simple. When facing multiple attackers, why aim at just one when you can potentially hit them all? Naval officers absolutely loved these weapons because ship mutinies were a real and terrifying possibility. The confined spaces of a ship meant close-quarters combat was inevitable, and the Duck's Foot's wide spray pattern was perfect for below-deck confrontations. Henry Knock, the famous London gunsmith, produced some of the finest examples around 1780. Each barrel fired independently, but simultaneously, creating a devastating fan of lead that could cover a 60-degree arc. The psychological effect alone was probably worth the price of admission. But here's the kicker. After firing, you were essentially holding an expensive club. Reloading 4 barrels while angry mutineers charged at you wasn't exactly practical. Still, for that one crucial moment when you needed to turn the tide, nothing said, "I'm in charge here," quite like a Duck's Foot pistol. Number 7. Gyrojet Rocket Gun. Forget everything you know about bullets, because MBA associates looked at conventional ammunition in the 1960s and said, what if we just launched tiny rockets instead? The Gyrojet wasn't just a gun. It was a miniature rocket launcher masquerading as a pistol. Each 13mm cartridge contained its own solid rocket fuel and spin-stabilizing mechanism. Instead of using gunpowder to propel a bullet, the Gyrojet fired self-propelled projectiles that accelerated after leaving the barrel. These weren't bullets. They were genuine miniature rockets with tiny exhaust ports that made them spin for stability. The engineering was absolutely brilliant. No recoil because the rocket did all the work after leaving the gun. Lightweight construction because you didn't need a heavy barrel to contain explosive pressure. The rockets could theoretically reach higher velocities than conventional bullets and maintain that velocity over longer distances, but reality had other plans. At close range, where pistol fights actually happen, the rockets hadn't accelerated enough to be effective. We're talking about projectiles that were essentially harmless at distances under 50 feet. Imagine pulling this thing in a gunfight only to watch your rocket gently bounce off your opponent's shirt. The ammunition cost $1.35 per round in 1960s money. That's about $14 per shot today. When you can buy better performance from conventional ammunition at a fraction of the cost, your revolutionary rocket gun becomes an expensive paperweight. Still, you've got to admire the audacity. Number 6. Apache Revolver. What if I told you there was a weapon that could shoot you, stab you, and punch you all at the same time? Welcome to the Apache Revolver, the Swiss Army knife of violence and the calling card of early 1900s Parisian gangsters. This wasn't just a gun with extras. This was a complete combat system disguised as a revolver. The handle folded down to form brass knuckles, a double-edged blade folded out from the side, and nestled in the middle was a functional 6-shot revolver. It was like someone asked, what if we made the most intimidating weapon possible, and then actually did it? The weapon got its name from the Apache gangs of Paris. Not Native Americans, but French street criminals who terrorized the city in the early 1900s. These weren't your typical pickpockets. They were organized, violent, and they needed weapons as versatile as their criminal enterprises. But here's the beautiful irony. For all its intimidating appearance, the Apache Revolver was terrible at being any of its 3 components. The gun had no sights and used the cylinder as a barrel, making accuracy impossible beyond arm's length. The knife was awkwardly positioned and difficult to deploy effectively. Even the brass knuckles were uncomfortable because of the gun's bulk. About 7,000 were manufactured, and they've become incredibly valuable collector's items, not because they were effective weapons, but because they represent the pinnacle of why choose one weapon when you can have 3 mediocre ones instead. Number 5. Puckle Gun. In 1718, while most of the world was still figuring out how to make muskets fire reliably, James Puckle designed what might be history's first machine gun. But this wasn't just about rapid fire. This was about cultural warfare with a side of religious discrimination. The Puckle Gun, officially called the defense gun, was a tripod-mounted, manually operated flintlock that could fire up to 9 rounds per minute. In an era when trained soldiers could manage 3 shots per minute with a musket, this was absolutely revolutionary. The gun featured a revolving cylinder that could be preloaded and swapped out for continuous fire. But here's where Puckle's invention takes a dark turn into the absolutely bizarre. The gun was designed to fire 2 different types of ammunition, depending on the target. Round bullets were designated for Christian enemies. Apparently, they deserved a civilized death. But square bullets? Those were reserved for Muslim Turks, because Puckle believed irregular projectiles would cause more suffering. The engineering was actually sound for its time. The revolving mechanism was centuries ahead of Samuel Colt's famous revolver. The tripod mount provided stability, and the preloaded cylinders allowed for sustained fire that was unheard of in 1718. Unfortunately, the British military wasn't impressed. They tested it, acknowledged its mechanical ingenuity, but ultimately decided that the complexity and cost weren't worth the marginal improvement over conventional artillery. Only a few were ever built, making them incredibly rare mechanical marvels that represent both brilliant innovation and disturbing prejudice rolled into one fascinating weapon. Number 4. The Harmonica Gun. Jonathan Browning, father of the legendary John Moses Browning, looked at the single-shot rifles of the 1830s and thought, I can do better. What he created was mechanically brilliant, practically useful, and ultimately doomed by the march of technology. The harmonica gun wasn't actually shaped like a musical instrument, but its ammunition system sure looked like one. Instead of a traditional magazine, Browning used a sliding steel bar with multiple chambers, each preloaded with powder, ball, and percussion cap. Slide the bar, cock the hammer, fire, repeat. It was ingenious. This wasn't some basement inventor's fantasy. These guns actually worked. Browning could produce rifles capable of firing 5 to 25 shots without reloading, which was extraordinary for the era. The sliding mechanism was reliable, the construction was solid, and frontiersmen absolutely loved them for their practical advantages. Each gun took about 2 weeks to hand manufacture and sold for $24. Serious money in the 1840s America, but Browning was competing against mass production and technological advancement. While he was perfecting his sliding bar system, other inventors were developing metallic cartridges and improved magazine systems. The Civil War changed everything. Military contracts went to manufacturers who could produce thousands of standardized weapons, not craftsmen making dozens of custom rifles. Browning's harmonica guns became obsolete almost overnight, replaced by lever-action rifles that were cheaper, faster to manufacture, and easier to supply with ammunition. Today, surviving examples are priceless museum pieces that represent the last gasp of custom gunsmithing before the industrial age took over. Number 3. The volley gun. What happens when you take the concept of more is better and apply it to 18th century naval warfare? You get the volley gun, a weapon so powerful it could disable the person firing it. The most famous example was Henry Knox's 7-barreled naval gun, designed specifically for ship-to-ship combat. Picture this: 7 separate barrels arranged in a circle, all connected to fire simultaneously with a single flintlock mechanism. When triggered, this monster unleashed a devastating wall of lead designed to shred enemy rigging and clear enemy decks. The Royal Navy actually adopted these weapons in the 1780s, impressed by their potential for area denial and crowd control. The psychological impact alone was worth the investment. Imagine being on the receiving end of 7 musket balls fired simultaneously. The sound, the smoke, the sheer violence of it was designed to break enemy morale instantly. But physics had other plans. When all 7 barrels fired at once, the recoil was so severe it regularly dislocated shoulders and knocked sailors unconscious. The British Navy quickly discovered that a weapon that incapacitated your own crew wasn't exactly a tactical advantage. The guns were also incredibly heavy. We're talking about weapons that required multiple crew members just to move into position. Despite their flaws, volley guns represent the logical extreme of pre-industrial firepower. When your only options were single-shot weapons, the solution seemed obvious: just add more shots. The execution, however, proved that sometimes more really isn't better. Number 2. The Turbio Palm Squeezer Pistol. Imagine a weapon so perfectly concealed that you could shake hands with someone while pointing a loaded gun directly at them. Sound impossible? Meet the Turbio Palm Squeezer, the ultimate in 19th century stealth weaponry. Patented by Jacques Turbio in 1882, this wasn't just a small gun, it was a revolution in concealed carry. The entire weapon fit in the palm of your hand, with the barrel protruding between your middle fingers. To anyone watching, you appeared to be making a simple fist, but squeeze your palm, and 7 shots of .32 rimfire ammunition could ruin someone's entire day. The mechanics were surprisingly sophisticated. The gun functioned as a double-action revolver, but instead of a traditional trigger, a spring-loaded lever at the back activated the firing mechanism when compressed by the palm. No external hammer, no visible trigger, just a compact cylinder that looked more like a strange piece of hardware than a deadly weapon. American manufacturers licensed the design, and several variations appeared under names like the Protector and Chicago Palm Pistol. These weren't toys. They were serious self-defense weapons marketed to people who needed protection but couldn't openly carry firearms. But here's the brilliant part. The gun was so well concealed that even drawing it was completely covert. No fumbling for a holster, no obvious threatening gestures, just close the distance and squeeze. For personal protection in an era before modern concealed carry laws, this was revolutionary. Accuracy was essentially non-existent beyond arm's length, and the unusual grip made controlled fire nearly impossible. But at conversation distance, accuracy wasn't really the point. Intimidation and stopping power were. Number 1. The Elgin Cutlass Pistol. And here we are, the absolute pinnacle of why choose one weapon when you can have two? The Elgin Cutlass Pistol wasn't just bizarre. It was the only combination sword gun ever officially adopted by the United States military. George Elgin's 1837 patent created something that looked like it escaped from a pirate fantasy novel, a single-shot percussion pistol with an 11.5-inch Bowie knife blade attached underneath the barrel. This wasn't some novelty item. This was a serious military weapon, intended for naval boarding parties and close-quarters combat. The U.S. Navy actually ordered 150 of these monsters, making it America's first official percussion handgun and the only sword-pistol combination in military history. Think about that. While other nations were perfecting traditional firearms, America said, "Let's just tape a sword to a gun and see what happens." The logic was actually sound for naval warfare. Boarding actions were chaotic, close-range affairs where you might need both ranged and melee capabilities within seconds of each other. Fire your one shot, then immediately transition to sword fighting without missing a beat. But reality proved more complicated than theory. The weapon was incredibly heavy and awkward to use effectively as either a pistol or a sword. The balance was completely wrong for sword work, and the massive blade made the pistol unwieldy for accurate shooting. You essentially got two mediocre weapons instead of one good one. Still, for sheer audacity and historical significance, nothing tops the Elgin Cutlass Pistol. It represents the absolute peak of American more is better philosophy applied to weapons design, and the fact that it actually saw military service makes it the undisputed champion of crazy inventor firearms. There you have it, 10 firearms that prove inventors throughout history had absolutely no limits when it came to creative insanity. From rocket-powered bullets to palm-squeezed pistols, these weapons pushed the boundaries of what's even possible. Which one shocked you the most? The triangular bullet Dardick? The corner-shooting Krummlauf? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey through firearms history's strangest chapter, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell for more bizarre weapons content. Until next time, keep exploring the weird side of history.